Now let's walk through how to use your simple, safe solar battery backup system. Like the name says, this system is simple and safe. So these next few sections are not going to take up much of your time because our system is not complex or dangerous. First, we're going to discuss safety, then operation, then conservation, and finally maintenance. Alright, let's get started. When it comes to safety and your solar panels, there's really only one thing you need to remember, and that's how to disconnect your solar panels from the rest of the system. You may want to do that if your outdoor cable has become damaged and you need to fix it. In order to disconnect the solar panels from the rest of the system, let's go into the combiner box, remove the front cover screw, and let's open the panel. Now, in order to disconnect the solar panels from the rest of the system, we simply need to flip the switch on the GFP device to the off position. Now our solar panels are disconnected from the rest of the system, and we can go ahead and fix the outdoor cable. Once the cable has been fixed, you can go ahead and flip the switch on the GFP device back to the on position. Also, keep wires from hanging down where children and animals can easily come in contact with them. If you do have to run cable in an area where children might be present, consider running the cable through a PVC pipe just as an added safety precaution. Now we're back in the garage and we need to cover how to stay safe when tinkering with your system. Before you fix a damaged wire or replace a broken circuit breaker or install a new battery, you need to follow these steps. First, I would highly recommend taking a Sharpie and writing the word panels next to circuit breaker number 1 because circuit breaker number 1 is used to disconnect the solar panels from the solar charge controller. And then I would mark the word battery next to circuit breaker number 2, which is used to disconnect the solar charge controller from the battery bank. Now let's mark battery inverter switch next to the battery to inverter disconnect switch. Now that we've labeled all of our switches, let's go ahead and power down the inverter. Then let's turn the battery to inverter disconnect switch to the off position. Now let's open the circuit breaker marked battery. And finally, let's open the circuit breaker marked panels. Now the inverter is disconnected from the battery bank, and the battery bank is disconnected from the solar charge controller, and the solar charge controller is disconnected from the solar panels. Now you can safely complete any maintenance or tinkering on your system. Now a quick safety reminder regarding the battery bank. You should never need to use tools when replacing a battery. The wing nuts are easily loosened and tightened with your fingers. But if you do need to use a tool for some reason, completely avoid using metal tools like this. Rather, make sure you use tools that have some form of rubber insulation on the grip. And be careful. Batteries can kill. Also, put some scrap plywood underneath your battery bank just to form a good barrier between the garage floor and your batteries. And you absolutely need to make sure that you seal up your battery bank so that kids or animals do not accidentally come in contact with your batteries. Remember, batteries can kill. Once you're done tinkering or fixing your system, you'll need to power it up again. The manufacturer of the solar charge controller recommends turning the battery circuit breaker on first before turning on the solar panel circuit breaker. Let's go ahead and do that now. We'll reset the little yellow tab on the battery circuit breaker. That will turn on the solar charge controller. Verify that it's on. Then we can go ahead and reset the yellow tab on the panels circuit breaker. And we can turn our battery inverter switch back to the on position. And finally, we can power up our inverter again. Lastly, let's talk about how to operate our inverter in a safe manner. There's a little instruction book that comes with the inverter. Read it. I'm not going to cover everything that's in it. It's basic. Follow it. Basically, the manual says to treat the inverter output the same as commercial AC power. Don't use the inverter near flammable materials or water or other liquids. Don't use appliances with damaged or wet cords. Then there's recommendations regarding the inverter operating environment. Basically, keep it out of the sun and don't let the surrounding air temperature get too hot. Then it goes through appliance cautions. I'll go ahead and let you read those. Basically, it's just covering what appliances you should and should not use with the inverter. They also recommend that you do not use an extension cord longer than 50 feet when connecting from your inverter to your appliance. Finally, pay attention to the LED overload indicator, and I'm reading directly from the manual now. If continuous power draw of appliances exceeds 3,500 watts, this light will turn orange or red and the inverter will automatically shut down. When this occurs, turn off the inverter and determine the cause of the overload before turning the inverter and the appliance back on. That's it for safety. Like I said, I designed this system to be simple and safe. If you follow the things we've just covered and you go through the inverter manual, you should have no safety issues with this system. Now let's move on to operation. Like I said before, this system is very simple to operate. The solar charge controller is the central hub of the system. Read the user manual so you understand all of the solar charge controller's features. Let's begin with the display. The display cycles through three parameters. The first is the battery bank voltage, the second is the amps coming from the solar panels, and the third is the load amps, which we're not using because we have no DC load connected to the solar charge controller. Now select the proper charging for the batteries being used. Turn the rotary switch with a small flathead screwdriver to the battery type printed on the label. If you purchase the flooded batteries that I listed on the system parts list, then you will need to turn the rotary switch to number 3. Let's take a look at our 3 battery status LEDs. If the green one is on or blinking on and off, that means our battery bank has plenty of charge. If the yellow one is on, that means our battery bank is at middle capacity. If the red one is blinking, that means our battery bank is at a low charge state. Pay attention to your 3 battery status LEDs. They will tell you how much power you're using and how much power you still have available. Now let's go from our solar charge controller down to our inverter. Again, our inverter is very simple to operate. We have our on-off switch, and then we have our display. We can switch between watts or volts. We're going to keep it on watts because our solar charge controller already displays the battery bank voltage. Then we have 4 standard 15 amp outlets. I'm going to go ahead and plug my drill in so we can watch the display change as I turn it on and off. When I was running my drill, as you just saw, the power settled at about 180 watts. But how much current was I using for my battery bank? Here's the math. Voltage times current equals power. We know the voltage of our battery bank, 24 volts. And we know the power that it took to run my drill, 180 watts. So we just need to divide the power by the voltage and we'll get the current. 180 divided by 24 is 7.5. I'll round up to 8. It took approximately 8 amps from our battery bank to run the drill. Now the current capacity of our battery bank is 200 amp hours because our 4 12-volt batteries are connected in the 24-volt configuration. 200 amp hours means that our battery bank can provide approximately 200 amps of steady DC current for 1 hour, or 100 amps for 2 hours, or 50 amps for 4 hours. So how long would it take our drill to completely drain our battery bank? Take the capacity of the battery bank, which is 200 amp hours, and divide it by the 8 amps that my drill uses. 200 divided by 8 equals about 25 hours. In real life, you never want to run your battery bank below 50% capacity because the life of your batteries will be drastically reduced. Again, pay attention to your battery status LEDs on the solar controller. It's okay if the yellow LED goes on early in the morning before the sun comes up, but make sure that you don't use a lot of power until midday, and then make sure your green status LED goes on by the end of the day. The best thing you can do for your batteries is to make sure they get charged back up quickly once they've been at middle capacity for a little while. Why am I giving you this information? Because you need to know how much each of your tools and appliances drain your battery bank. You also need to know how quickly your solar panels can recharge your battery bank. During the day, your solar panels will provide anywhere from only a few amps to close to 14 amps. If it's a cloudy day in the middle of winter, you may only get 3 or 4 amps from your panels. However, if it's a clear day in the middle of summer, you may get 13 or 14 amps from your panels. So let's do the math. If I run my drill for an hour, then I just decreased my battery bank capacity by 8 amp hours. 200 minus 8 equals 192 amp hours of capacity left in my battery bank. If it's a cloudy day in the winter and my solar panels are only producing around 4 amps, then it will take my panels 2 hours to recharge the battery bank after I used the drill for an hour. 2 hours times 4 amps equals the 8 amp hours that I used when I ran my drill for an hour. I'm going through these numbers for those of you that want to estimate your power needs and then make sure you aren't using more power than your panels can provide. There is a free handout on my website that has a very basic worksheet so you can plan out how to balance your power usage with the power coming in from the solar panels. This is called a solar budget, and it's the same idea as a household budget. You can't spend more money than you make. Likewise, you can't use more power than your solar panels bring in. I'll let you take it from this point. You can do it. Download the handout and complete the solar budget. Here's a quick example of how to do a solar power budget. Let's say that your solar panels can produce approximately 10 amps during the early fall when you have 7 good hours of sunlight. That means your panels can provide 70 amp hours during the day. So here's what our solar power budget looks like. We're doing it just like a checkbook transaction register. We know that 70 amp hours are available. We want to run our freezer. It uses 2 amps for about 8 hours total throughout the day. That's 16 amp hours that we subtract. Then we are going to use the microwave for half an hour. The microwave uses 50 amps, so we subtract 25 amp hours. Finally, we want to use a light for 4 hours at night, and it uses 1 amp. So we subtract 4 amp hours. 70 minus 16 minus 25 minus 4 equals 25 amp hours that we didn't use. That means we stayed within our solar power budget and we have power to spare. However, there are no rollover amp hours. If you don't use the power, the solar panels won't produce it. This example is fairly simplistic, but I hope you get the idea. Now, whether or not you understand the math, as long as you abide by the following system rules, you should have a consistently balanced power budget. Number 1. Run your appliances and tools during midday when there is plenty of sun to recharge the battery bank. The best times are usually around 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the winter and around 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the summer. Number 2. Watch your battery status LEDs every day. Your aim is to have your battery bank at full capacity every evening. If you are consistently draining your batteries to middle capacity during the day, which is indicated by the yellow status LED, then you need to redo your solar power budget. Number 3, pay attention to the weather. During storms and cloudy days, try to use your system as little as possible. Number 4, you must follow the power conservation guide that is freely available on my website. The Simple Safe Solar system is designed around that power conservation guide. And finally, number 5, experiment now. Don't wait until the crisis comes to get to know your system. Run some tools, run your freezer. Take a week and try running your home and doing your chores only using power provided from your system. Well, that's it for operation. Now let's move on to conservation. I'm not going to cover everything I've already discussed in the Power Conservation Guide that is freely available on my website. What I'm going to do now is emphasize that you really can find creative ways to drastically reduce your power needs. Let's focus on one of the most important areas, food refrigeration. In the Power Conservation Guide, I said that during a prolonged power outage, you will need to migrate the food from your kitchen refrigerator to a smaller compact refrigerator, probably in your garage, close to your inverter and batteries. Is it difficult to go from this to this? Now let's take a look at what my refrigerator is doing for me right now. As we look through the refrigerator, we'll begin to find that there are things that don't need to be refrigerated, or things that are taking up too much space and could be condensed into a smaller container. We also will find things that we're not going to eat, or things that are expired. Let's take a look. We have a can of coffee that does not need to be refrigerated. We have a gallon of milk that is almost empty, so we can condense that into a smaller container. And you know you've done this before too. 2-week-old lasagna. This can definitely go. Then we have some bread. This doesn't need to be in the refrigerator. Then some expired sour cream. This can go in the trash. A bag of chocolate chips that don't have to be in the refrigerator. And a cake that doesn't have to be in the refrigerator. And then we have a few grapes. We should just set these on the counter and let the kids eat them. We've got some expired yogurt. That should go in the trash. And then we have this mostly empty box with a couple yogurts in it. Let's take the yogurts out and toss the box. Now let's take a look at the condiments that are on the side door of the refrigerator. A number of these we never use, or they're mostly empty, or even expired. We can probably eliminate more than half of these. We've eliminated the 2 bottom shelves and condensed everything that we actually need on one shelf. Pretty amazing, huh? Finally, let's look at our vegetable drawer. We probably want to keep most of these refrigerated. And then we have our cheeses and our sandwich meat. As you can see now, we have lots of empty space in the refrigerator. What that means is the refrigerator is spending most of its energy keeping the air cold, not the food. Now let's see if we can fit these things in our compact refrigerator. Now I'm taking everything that was left in the kitchen refrigerator that really does need to stay cool, and I'm going to see if I can fit it into my compact refrigerator, which I'm going to run with my solar battery backup system. Would you look at that? We fit everything from our larger kitchen refrigerator into our smaller compact refrigerator in the garage. We've got all of our essential things like eggs and cheese, all of our vegetables, we've got our yogurt, peanut butter, mayonnaise, we've got even some leftover chili back there, all of our condiments, barbecue sauce, mustards, mayonnaise, relish, dressings, jam, and we still have a little bit of room to spare. By the way, this compact refrigerator is using a lot less power than my larger kitchen refrigerator, and it's actually keeping food cold, not just a bunch of empty, wasted space. This is called power conservation. I hope you see what I mean by power conservation. Power conservation means using only the power that you actually need. Like I just demonstrated to you, I had no problem fitting all my necessary food items from my large kitchen refrigerator into my smaller compact one. And my smaller one uses only a couple amps compared to the 10 amps that my large refrigerator uses. Now before I end this section, let's go back to the garage and talk about my freezer for just a moment. I designed the Simple Safe solar backup power system to run a medium-sized chest freezer, which is about 7 to 9 cubic feet. This size freezer is about what the average 4 to 6 person household would be using. The Power Conservation Guide on my website specifically covers how to conserve power with your freezer. But I just want to emphasize two important things. First, keep your freezer full. If you do this, your freezer won't turn on as often, and this saves power. Secondly, if your freezer is kept full, then you can actually shut it off at night. In order to do this, use a timer like one of these. Set the timer to shut off an hour after the sun goes down and have it turn on again an hour before the sun comes up. Well, that's it for conservation. Like I said at the beginning of this section, go to my website and print up the Power Conservation Guide and follow it. If you do, your Simple Safe solar system will be an incredible asset to you and your family during a time of crisis. Now let's move on to the final section, maintenance. There are only two things that I need to briefly mention regarding system maintenance. First, keep your solar panels clean, especially during the winter or during cloudy days. Just grab your hose or a bucket and a rag and wipe them down. Secondly, if you ordered the flooded lead-acid batteries that were on the parts list, then you will need to follow the battery maintenance guide. The process of equalizing, adding water, and keeping the terminals clean is beyond the scope of this DVD. However, the manual that comes with the batteries has everything you need to know to ensure that your batteries have a long and healthy life. I also included the battery maintenance manual on my website as a reference. One last thing. Always keep safety in mind whenever doing battery maintenance. Follow the power down routine that I already showed you in the safety section of this video. Well, that's it for maintenance. I can't think of anything else that you still need to know. We've covered a lot in the last 2 hours. How to buy and mount your solar panels. We've covered the complete wiring of the system, including all the grounding and safety circuitry. And we've covered the safe operation of your system, power conservation, and finally maintenance. The only thing left is for you to get it done.